Gentlemen, thank you. There was a coin toss, and whoever won had the decision as to be first or last, and Chip Flowers won the toss and will be the second opening statements. First to Mr. Barney.
Thank you, Alan, and thank you to WDEL for hosting this discussion. It is wonderful to be here. The test of public leadership is what you are able to accomplish for the people you represent. When Mr. Flowers ran 4 years ago, he made some big promises. Benefits distributed from the strategic fund, a new investment fund, various new tax credits. 4 years later, none of this has happened because Mr. Flowers seemingly is more interested in an enemies list than in keeping his promises. Now, having failed to fulfill his promises from 4 years ago, Mr. Flowers is simply making it up, running for re-election on a claim to have earned money he simply hasn't earned. Mr. Flowers has, unfortunately, squandered the potential of the office. I will realize the full potential of the office to contribute to the urgent work we have to do here today to broaden opportunity in Delaware and strengthen our middle class. That work begins with upholding public trust and confidence in the public management of the taxpayers' money. But it goes beyond that. It means demonstrating the ability to work effectively with partners inside and outside of government to make a positive difference in people's lives. And it means realizing the full potential of the office to broaden opportunity and inform the public debate, to help more of our youth go to college or get the training they need to achieve their dreams, to connect family with the resources they need to chart a brighter financial future for themselves, to create greater transparency around state spending so Delawareans can participate in the decision-making about their money and Delaware's future on an informed basis. This is an important office. It deserves responsible and effective leadership. With your support on September 9th, I will bring that leadership to the Treasurer's office.
Thank you, Mr. Barney, and up to 2 minutes, Treasurer Flowers.
Wonderful. Thank you, Alan, and thank you, WDL, and more importantly, thanks all the voters who have taken time out of their very busy lives to listen to this very important debate. I'm not going to discuss the negative stuff that's already happened, and we just started this debate, but we're going to focus on the issues tonight. This election is about electing or re-electing a treasurer that has a solid record of achievement, standing up for you, and a plan that will continue to propel Delaware forward. As your state treasurer, I have stood up for our state investments by making over $44 million through adversity. We've had positive returns 31 out of 38 months. I stood up for financial education by having the Delaware Economic Index and the Delaware Early Warning System, things I promised to you during my first term in office that I would accomplish, and I did accomplish. I stood up for also not just financial education, but I stood up for our portfolio, making sure it was protected. When I came into office, it was uncollateralized. And I stood up for the right way of managing our money by making sure we passed honest way reforms that focus on conflicts of interest for those managing our money, such as the Cash Management Policy Board, and making sure that they were required to do financial disclosures, because that's what's important, to make sure that those who are managing our money are making sure that your interest is before their own. But our work is not done, and that we have a plan to propel our state forward during the second term, which includes making sure that we revamp the strategic fund to give each family up to $1,500 from state economic investments. The fiscal debacle that my opponent and the governor manage should never happen again. That we have to make sure that when we use taxpayer funds for public projects, that the people have entitled to get some benefits from that. Second, we also talk about creating an academy of ideas for best practices, and also promoting financial education for our high school seniors and making sure they're equipped to have the tools to succeed in life. These are just a few of the ideas that I look forward to discussing this evening, and I hope that we can stay positive throughout this debate.
All right, gentlemen, thank you. Let's get to the first question, and let's cut to the chase if we could. Have you both respond to some of the impressions that some people have made about both of you in blogs and other places. Treasurer Flowers, that you have some good ideas about transparency, not letting the old Delaware way decide how the state's money is invested, but that you've been a bull in the china shop, alienated people in the process, lost some valuable time and persuasive abilities. So lawmakers have sought to curb your powers. Mr. Barney, that, forgive me on this, that you're kind of a lackey for the entrenched interests, Governor Markell, Senator Carper, back to the old way. All right, Mr. Flowers, you get the first response.
Sure. I am not a bull in the china shop. I just believe in standing up for what Delawareans believe in, that we have to do it the honest way and the right way. It's not good enough for me to just win. We have to win right, and we have to do what's right for the people of this state. That I went ahead and took on the establishment. I really do believe that we should have conflicts of interest policies. We actually have financial disclosure. These are fights worth having. I realize that there are those who believe I should go along to get into Woodburn. But that's not what this position is about. This position is about making sure that we invest our money, which has made millions for the state. It's about protecting our money, which we did by securing and collateralizing our portfolio. This position is about making sure that we stand for what's right and making sure that we follow the best practices that are adopted by other states. So if name calling is what they choose to do, so be it. I recognize that it was my first term, and yes, some mistakes were made. But at the same time, we made a lot of accomplishments that wouldn't have happened if we didn't stand up. So we're going to continue to stand up. We're going to work with those lawmakers that are willing to work with us. And hopefully the administration, and including the former policy director, who I'm sure will go back to the governor's office at the conclusion of this election, he will continue to work with us to make sure that we're doing these things because they're in the best interest of the people of this state.
Thank you, Mr. Flowers. And now to Mr. Barney.
I've had the privilege in my career to work for public servants like Bill Bradley, like Tom Carper, like Jack Markell. I've learned a great deal, but I have chosen to step out on my own because I have seen in my work for them that public leaders make a difference when they step out and take a risk, when they do something other than what anyone would do sitting in their seat with a finger in the wind. And to make that difference, it's got to be in your heart. You've got to do it yourself because you can't push others out on that limb if it's not in their heart. I am my own person. Tom Carper will tell you that. Governor Markell will tell you that. Tom Carper pleaded with me after 9/11 to stay in his office and not to enlist in the Marine Corps and end up going over and fighting in Iraq. I chose my own course and my own compass on that. Similarly, Governor Markell asked me to stay in his administration, be a part of the work that he is doing for the last couple of years of his administration. But for the reasons I just said of what's in my heart, my own ideas that I want to put forward, essentially around widening income inequality, the hollowing out of our middle class, the need to urgently do something about that, I decided, despite what he asked me to do, to step out and take this race and to seek this position. So I'm a person of my own ideas, my own integrity, and I intend to be an independent voice for the people of Delaware.
Thank you, Sean. Barney, back and forth, cross-examination round. Either one may come in, and you may interrupt within reason.
Sure. I will try not to interrupt. I want to make sure this is a very respectful debate. But no, I believe that my opponent said it well, that being an elected official about stepping out and taking a risk. And I think those of you who are listening tonight know that if anyone has stepped out and taken a risk, it's myself. And I put my own political career on the line because that's what public service is about. It's not about worrying about going along to get along to make sure you get to the next office. That's not what the treasurer is about. The treasurer, when I came into office, we had many problems. The portfolio was not doing well. Our money, we had a $2 billion portfolio that was not collateralized, one of only a very small number of states that did not have their money collateralized. So as a result, if money would have been lost at a bank, we would have lost our money, millions. So we had to take some risks. We had to go out and confront these challenges and issues. No, we did not send Hallmark cards. I'm going to be the first to say it. I did not send Hallmark cards to everyone and said, please, we tried to work with people. And of course, as you see in Washington, sometimes when you ask multiple times, people just say no. No, not because they don't believe it's in the best interest of the people of the state. It's no because they don't want that elected official to succeed. So we went ahead and did those things, and we are happy that we did those things. And I think that my record of achievement, despite those who choose to try to deny it or don't want to publish it, but it's there, it's strong, and that's why I have the honor and privilege by my colleagues being the national co-chair of the Democratic State Treasurers. The first time it's ever done for a first-time treasurer because of our accomplishments and achievements. So we're going to stick to our record, and we're very proud of our record. And to borrow a line from my opponent, yes, we stepped out and took some risk, and they paid off for the people of this great state.
Well, that's the key question is, has it paid off? Because Mr. Flowers likes to talk about going along to get along, as if having just about everybody in state government, from the Attorney General to the leadership of the General Assembly to the governor to the members of the board that he sits on and serves on the Cash Management Policy Board, barely having working relationships with them, that the alternative to that is to go along to get along. But you don't have to agree with people to work with them and get things done. And why is that important? It's important because Mr. Flowers sounds very impressive with all these great ideas. Signature proposal is a strategic fund proposal, what he's going to do with you from the strategic fund. He ran on the exact same thing last time around. What has he done 4 years later? It's not happened. Why has it not happened? Because A, he doesn't have control of the strategic fund any more than the Attorney General or the auditor of accounts has control of the strategic fund. The only way he could make that happen, the only way he could deliver on his promise that he's making to you now to give $1,500 to you from the strategic fund, is if he could actually work constructively with the General Assembly to pass a bill. But the only thing that Treasurer Flowers has managed to motivate the General Assembly to do as far as legislation is to pass on a unanimous basis, without a dissenting vote, law to clarify the limits of his authority to invest state funds. So there's got to be an alternative. There's got to be something in between not being able to get along with just about anybody that you have to work with to get things done, and therefore having a record of broken promises from 4 years ago, and some go along to get along where you don't, yes, step out and take risk and have independence of mind. A strong leader has independence of mind, puts forward ideas, and doesn't go along to get along, but brings people along and gets things done.
Mr. Barney, I've heard you say this a couple of times. I'm going to take issue with it. You talk about that everybody in the world is against me, and really when it comes down to it, it's just the establishment, those who disagree on a policy perspective. That's wrong. Let's not throw the Attorney General in this. I don't think Bo Biden ever gave a excuse me, Bo Biden.
You called him corrupt.
No, I did
How
not.
do you expect to work with him in the future?
Excuse me, Mr. Barney. I gave you an opportunity to speak. I think you should give me the same privilege. Bo Biden I've never called the Attorney General of the state corrupt. You might have been reading something from a periodical that loves to quote misleading statements. But that being of it said, is that there are allies and supporters, from John Kowalko, others, obviously nationally and locally that we have. We worked at the White House on multiple initiatives to work on legislation to protect.
Which of the bills you proposed have you passed?
Mr. Barney, let me finish. I know you probably had your Wheaties this morning, but I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to challenge things that you say that are incorrect. But like I said before, is that what we've done here today is talk about ideas. And just because the administration opposes the ideas and you were the policy director and things were put against us and through adversity, doesn't mean that they weren't the right ideas, Mr. Barney. This means that, you got your way and your administration got your way. So we're going to continue putting forth the right ideas, whether financial disclosure for the board, conflicts of interest of policy for the board, whether we talk about revamping the strategic fund so fiscal debacles don't happen. We're going to continue to put them forward. I don't back off of it. We're going to continue to challenge the establishment because these are ideas. People are suffering in this state. You were the former policy director of the state of Delaware, and people are suffering. So I believe it is my obligation, my constitutional duty, my oath that I've taken to the state to put forth ideas. And yes, I'm not going to win 100% of the time. That's okay. That's called democracy. But you know what? We're going to continue to put forth those ideas that I think are important to the people of this state.
But it matters when you lose all of the time, because then what's the use in bringing you back for another 4 years if the result is predictable? Again, what's the use of placing faith in this proposal for $1,500 from the strategic fund if we know, we've seen this story before, we know what's going to happen? Let's talk about something much more modest, your transparency proposal. The most modest of proposals, we're talking about taking, currently the board members have to fill out the financial disclosure forms, which have their own weaknesses, but have to do it once every 3 years. You propose to move it from 3 years to 1 year, not a revolutionary proposal. Why couldn't you get that done with the General Assembly?
Mr. Barney, but you keep talking about why you can't. You were the former policy director of the governor of the state of Delaware.
I wasn't in office when this was put forward.
These are problems that have been challenged for the last 3 to 4 years since I've taken office. It is wonderful, convenient tonight that you want to dump and sit there and say, because your administration opposed these ideas and we couldn't get them through, that the treasurer is ineffective.
Well, let me interrupt myself for a second, gentlemen, since you're both Ds. And I assume you will be after this debate as well. The governor was unable to get his highway funds passed. The attorney general was unable to get most of his gun legislation passed. General Assembly is a pretty independent-minded body, and I'm just going to ask whether Chip Flowers in his second term is going to be able to do anything differently to have a better record in Dover at the legislature. Or Mr. Barney, what persuasive powers will you bring where you can do better than Bo Biden or Jack Markell? Either one of you.
Well, sure. Like I said, we did have a successful legislative record. We were able to get the board to meet for more than twice a year, which was just ridiculous that a board managing the state's $2 billion portfolio was only meeting twice a year. We required them to meet more, but the statute only required them to meet twice a year. We were able to get financial disclosure on the table. We were able to get conflicts of interest on the table. We did get certain reforms through the General Assembly. Yes, just like Congress, as the people who are listening tonight know, you have legislators are independent-minded bodies, but that doesn't mean that you don't put through the ideas ideas. And so we're going to continue to put through those ideas. And as you know, in 2016, we'll have a new governor, whether we don't know which party it's going to be from, and we look forward to working with them. And so, I have a sneaking suspicion, as I'm sure most voters do, that a lot of these issues are going to fall out in 2017 when the new governor takes office, who will likely not be a former treasurer. So I think there is hope on the horizon, but we're going to continue working with those who are appointed or elected to serve with us.
Yeah, give Mr. Barney a response, and we'll go to another round. Go on.
Well, let me talk about ideas that I helped to formulate that got done and are now the law of the land. I worked together with Drew Fennell when she was at the Criminal Justice Council before she came in and took my position in the governor's office, and we developed some of the criminal justice reform proposals that were part of the governor's State of the State. Very important, not just from a criminal justice standpoint, but from a fiscal and budgetary standpoint. We spend far too much money in this state right now incarcerating people. When we fail and don't keep them from recidivating and coming back, we end up spending upwards of $30,000 a year to put them back in prison. It devastates communities. To the extent we can break that by passing things like ban the box, by moving from concurrent sentencing, moving to concurrent sentencing from mandatory consecutive sentencing. Those are proposals that make sense. We formulated them. We did the groundwork. We talked with legislators. We took their ideas. We dialogued with them. And at the end of the day, we put forth policies, and I give enormous credit not only to the governor, but to Drew, who came into the governor's office after I left and deserves the lion's share of the responsibility of working with the legislators to get it done at the end of the day. But policy development up front, that's when you lay the groundwork with ideas. Again, this strategic fund proposal, this is one of those ideas where you can tell from the beginning in policy formation, when it's never been a responsibility of the treasurer's office, when it has no connection with the treasurer's office, and when it involves devolving other offices into the treasurer's office in a grab of power, you can be pretty certain that it's not going to go anywhere.
Okay, let me begin another formal round. Mr. Barney is going to get the first response here. Mr. Barney, then, are you satisfied with the conduct and outside interests of each and every member of the Cash Management Board? And I would like you to specifically address the SEC concern with David Marvin.
What I have said in previous debates to Mr. Flowers is where there are individual concerns with individual members, they should be reported to the proper authorities, in this case, the Public Integrity Commission, and where it is appropriate to the Attorney General. So where there are concerns, it should certainly be taken up. I'm not familiar in the way that Mr. Flowers is with the records of every member of the board. I've not served with them yet. I'm not here to vouch for individual members of the board. I will vouch for having the board and not trying to do away with the board or go around the board the way Mr. Flowers has tried to do, because the board has existed since the Farmers Bank debacle for a very important reason. At that time, politicians had their hands in this money. Politically motivated loans went bad. Our state nearly went belly up. We required a federal rescue on crippling terms. It crippled our credit for years to come, cost us enormously financially. And the wisdom of the General Assembly coming out of that was to create a system where we would never again give control of what has become $2 billion to one elected official, that we wouldn't do that. And that is the reason we wouldn't do that is because it's a recipe for corruption. Where you have this elsewhere, where a single elected official has control without checks and balances of that kind of money, you see soft corruption in the way of accepting gifts and travel in return for steering state investments. You see hard corruption. You see treasurers indicted for accepting straight up cash for steering state investments. Delaware is wise to not go down that course.
All right, thank you, Mr. Barney. Treasurer Flowers, uninterrupted, up to 2 minutes.
Thank you so much. My opponent just spent, the prior question, a significant amount of time talking about the criminal justice system and the policies he did, even though it had nothing to do with the Treasury, but it was still a wonderful, wonderful dissertation on the policies he adopted. But then we had a specific example right now about an SEC complaint on an individual on the board, and he went crawfishing. This is not the leadership that we need. Again, a specific example right here tonight for our voters who are listening, where we brought up an SEC complaint against an individual that got fined, and all of a sudden, the former governor's policy director didn't know anything about that, and all of a sudden it became, I'm not going to work around the board. Listen, let's cut the crap. At the end of the day, this board is responsible for managing $2 billion of taxpayer money. There's a criminal complaint, or excuse me, an SEC complaint on an individual on the board that was appointed and reappointed by the governor of the state, and you are the policy director of the governor. You have to take responsibility. It's not enough to lecture people about the criminal justice system and talk about Treasurer Flowers wants to devolve powers away from DDO and the strategic fund, which is not true, by the way. It's not enough. This is what we're talking about, stepping out, taking the risk, to borrow your line, Mr. Barney, that you have to be on the forefront as treasurer. You represent and you take an oath of office for the people of this state. And when people or individuals or we believe may or may not be acting irresponsibly, we have an obligation to report it. And that's what we did. And yes, we still made $44 million. Yes, our returns were 31 out of 38 under my administration. All these was positive. But we can do better. And I want people to do better because that's why I'm serving and that's why I stand up. So if it means that, we're going to sit here tonight and you're going to accuse me for everything for, under the sun, then so be it. But at the end of the day, this is why the people put me in office. And that's why we have a great record, because we have to speak up on these issues. It's not enough to go crawfishing when a moderator asks you to address a specific allegation on a board member. Get engaged.
There's not
cross-examination back and forth.
There's not crawfishing. I am doing exactly what I asked you to do, which is evidently what you did. I said it should be a report to the Public Integrity Commission, and what you're saying you did is report him to the Public Integrity Commission. So I don't understand how I'm crawfishing and you're standing up.
Why was he reappointed, Mr. Barney? I mean, this is what I'm talking about. People have a right. It's not enough.
What was the outcome of the Public Integrity Commission?
It's not enough to sit here in front of the voters of Delaware and talk about, Treasurer Flowers doesn't get along and make up stories. It's more than that, Mr. Barney. It's about making sure that individuals have a duty. I spent the last 8 months of my life fighting false allegations from the News Journal, Under the Sun, people coming after me. But just stand in it. You got to stand in it. Yes, you're right, Mr. Barney. The administration was able to take advantage of those false allegations and got some powers removed that I believe one day we're going to get back. But you have to stand in it. You got to make a stand and make sure, because you're fighting for the people of this state. And that's important. So this is a test of leadership. And I'm not attacking your credentials. I'm not attacking any of that. It's just a matter of, yes, we see the world differently. I believe that this is a wonderful example of why you have to be an engaged treasurer. So because someone might be voting and acting in an interest counter to the people of this state. And
I'm still waiting for an answer to the question, which is what happened to the Public Integrity Commission referral, which was the appropriate thing to do. And what was the outcome?
Mr. Barney,
did they find that there was reason to remove him from the board?
Mr. Barney, we're not talking about specific investigations underway. We're talking about a question.
So you didn't refer it,
Mr. Barney. We're talking about the question that the moderator asked you about.
So did you?
Why did this individual? Why was he reappointed? And
that wasn't the question.
And what are your thoughts on this individual being a member of the board?
And I said, because I don't know the specifics of this case, so I don't know.
Well, you should know the specifics of the case because you want my job, and my job is to know the specifics of these cases. And so it is a specific case. I encourage you to go out there and read the information because it's important.
So what was the
specifics of the case? Was the SEC fined this individual
when was that?
Almost $1 million about 5 to 7 years ago. Fined him almost $1 million because of some fraudulent activity.
And as a result, you did what?
Mr. Barney, I don't reappoint.
How did you stand up?
Mr. Barney, I don't reappoint members to the board. The governor and the governor's policy team.
No, but you certainly could report it if you think it's a serious problem.
So it's my job to do your job now.
My job.
Barney,
I'm not in the governor's office. I didn't report anybody.
Probably about an impasse here. Next question will be directed at Treasurer Flowers. I'm just going to bring up the Erica Benner thing up once. And this is my question. Here you are, smart guy, bright guy, and you certainly want to progress with your reform efforts. And you know there's going to be pushback, kickback. That said, you know that they're going to go after you, right? If every I isn't dotted and every T isn't crossed. So I'm just trying to understand why you would not have made more sure about the activities of Deputy Treasurer Erica Benner, monitoring her activities, making it sure that there were not expenditures for anything that could be used as political hay against you.
Alan, that is a fair point, and I want to first off say I apologize to people of this state. When I came into office, we had a credit card verification system that stopped with the deputy state treasurer, and as you can see, The problem was with the deputy state treasurer, so you can see what happened there. And I should have known what was going on in that process. We overhauled it. We made sure we took steps, substantive steps that the auditor's office is now verified to make sure we did the right thing. And I assure you that it will never happen again, and it shouldn't have happened to begin with. I am very disappointed in those who knew about this for over 2 years before bringing it to my attention, because once it was brought to my attention, it never happened again. So it means it was a problem that was easily be solved. So, Alan, I can tell you is that we've reduced the number of credit cards in the office. I think we had over 18 cards, and we've got them down to 3. The cards are secure. All statements come to the treasurer, and we make sure that any individual that in this office that hides or has knowledge of inappropriate behavior, we hold them just as responsible as the individual who did it. And as you see, the process is working. It's effective. We were commended for our steps that we took by the Office of the Auditor. But again, I apologize to the public. It shouldn't have happened. And I assure you now that all documents flow up. And so, that's just one that I'm going to take responsibility for. But I'm going to assure the public tonight it will not happen again. But make no bones about it. I never used my credit card inappropriately. All my travel was for legitimate business trips, and so that was verified. And so I'm sorry that the public, some periodicals were misleading the public on that regard. But with respect to the former deputy, that one's on me, and I will make sure, and I have made sure, that it will never happen again.
Mr. Barney.
Well, first, just as a matter of factual record, the auditor's report did not verify that that the treasurer's spending was not personal in nature. The author of that report has been asked about that and said that they did not and could not verify that. I am pleased to hear Mr. Flowers take responsibility finally at this point for this, because the reality is there were personal charges being made out of the treasurer's office for 16 months, and it took outside intervention from outside the office to stop it. And this is a matter of simple talking about stepping forward. This is a matter of stepping forward and being involved as a manager in your office. I don't care whether it's a small business, a Fortune 500 company, and certainly when you're talking about taxpayer money in government, you ought to be regularly reviewing and approving the charges of those working for you, reporting to you, particularly when these are people that are working very, very closely with you, traveling with you on a regular basis, the closest that you can be. And at that point, it is a matter of personal responsibility. So I think it's appropriate to take responsibility, but I will tell you this is something that simply will not happen in my office. We will not be in a report like this because from the very outset, we will have direct supervision, because it's important because of the message that it sends to the taxpayers. If this is what is going on in the office, then how can the taxpayers have any confidence that the treasurer is doing the treasurer's job of ensuring the integrity of the money that's going out across state government out of the treasurer's office as the disbursement office of the state?
Mr. Barney, that again, that's one of those grandiose statements that you make. But again, several points. Number one, the governor's office was cited for numerous problems in the office where you were the policy director in that office. And they showed a systemic problem throughout the state on a policy. You were the policy director. It showed that the travel policy was flawed, had multiple issues with the policy. I mean, you can't crawfish your way out of it and say, oh, there you go. This is just, if I was in the office. No, you were in the office where that happened. Number two.
Let me respond to that.
No, you will have your chance to respond.
The auditor's office.
Mr. Barney, you will have your chance to respond. You want to go lay out.
I'll respond. If you've got more, you can give me more. But let me respond to that before we get too far on.
I know you had your Wheaties this morning.
Before we go on.
I'm going to finish
the auditor's report.
Number two, there was no
made it clear that
okay, both of you talking is not going to achieve anything.
No, Mr. Barney, you will have a chance to respond. But I waited patiently as you threw the lies over here, so we're going to throw the truth back to you. Number two, the facts were from an outside influence. It was no outside influence. What are you talking about? I was the one who disclosed it to the News Journal after the deputy self-reported her medical issue to us, and we discovered what happened. So we did find out about it. Now, 16 months, again, members of the administration knew and members of my office knew. It should have reported up to me. It didn't. But that's for history and books to know. But I can tell you right now, it is being reported up to me. Third, the auditor's report did clear me. You don't see anything about personal charges in there just because a periodical that might have asked the auditor a question that we don't know if it's taken out of context, but the report is crystal clear that the treasurer used all of his charges for legitimate business expenditures. Page 11, if I have to cite you. Page 11 says that legitimate business purposes. There was not a single personal charge on there. So let's not try to skew the voters or anything like that. So you're more than happy to respond to anything I said, but let's make sure that we tell people the truth of what happened. And just like there were problems in the governor's office, problem in the Secretary of Transportation, problem in the Treasury, there were systemic problems with the travel policy. The OMB claims nothing was wrong with it. That's on them. There was a systemic problem, and it needs to be addressed, and I'm happy that we're taking the steps to address it.
The report says that there were rules that they described as confusing and potentially costing the taxpayers more than they saved. But there was one rule that was not broken by any other office that is crystal clear, simple, and never going to change because it is the fundamental right of the taxpayer to expect it as a standard, which is personal charges are not made, charges for personal enrichment are not made at the taxpayer's expense. There was only one office where that was happening. And I'm glad that at 16 months later, once you found out that you did something, I would certainly hope you would, but it was the Secretary of Finance from outside of your office who had to come in and say, what is this mess here, before anything happened. So, and I encourage people as well to read the report. There is nothing in there that says that the expenditures of the treasurer, that the questions that have been hanging out there have been answered by that report. And indeed, the authors and the staff of that report had disclaimed any such suggestion because they simply didn't verify it. The only thing that's new about the report is that it makes clear that purchases that were previously described by the treasurer's office as business in nature were in fact personal in nature. So it's a strange sort of form of vindication to suggest that you're vindicated when you're at the center of this whole mess, when statements that were put out of the Treasurer's Department to the people of Delaware turn out to be conflicted by the report, and when it took that long for you to be on top of what was happening in your own shop.
Mr. Barney, let me take an issue with this because only one publication, the News Journal, which people, I think the voters know how I feel about that publication. But that being said, Mr. Barney, you had your chance. Relax. We're going to get to you again. But only one publication had those conflicting statements. There were never any conflicting statements. That was an effort, and we've made communication to the Gannett Company to say to stop the misleading statements. What happened in that particular situation was the individual involved waived, the Deputy State Treasurer waived her right to any legitimate reimbursement that she had. And as a result, we closed the account out by saying it was a personal charge. That's what the auditor's office did. That's why there was not a single word in the auditor's report that said Treasurer Flowers issued a conflicting statement. Only the News Journal and Sean Barney magically seems to be saying
conflicting statements are on the record.
Mr. Barney, you can't have my time and your time.
You tend to forget that there's a record.
I know you probably saw the Mitt Romney-Obama debate, and you probably saw the first one got all juiced up. But Mr. Barney, you can't sit here tonight and tell me I was there. You've never attended a single cash management policy board meeting. You've never been to the Treasury to meet with me, so you can't go.
I was just there this morning to pick up the FOIA request that I had asked for you.
Mr. Barney, I know you want
without FOIA on the last debate, and you wouldn't deliver it until we FOIA'd you.
I know you want my time and your time.
On the morning before the debate, you finally come through with what we asked for, which is great transparency. Mr. Barney, can I please speak? You've been speaking a lot.
Mr. Barney, can I please speak uninterrupted?
You can speak right now.
Thank you, Mr. Barney. With respect to the Secretary of Finance, the Secretary of Finance runs the credit card program. The Treasury, people get confused. The Treasury does not have access to the credit card systems. That's operated by the governor and his administration.
You can review charges of personnel, can you not? Well, this is supposed to be free form and back and forth.
Mr. Barney, can I please make a statement? You said
I gotta tell you what, guys, gentlemen. Maybe if we try to keep each side to maybe 20 seconds, can we try to do that as we close this round?
Thank you. So the Secretary of Finance is the one who's responsible for the credit card program, and it was a proper official to notify me of what was going on because the administration, not the Treasury, has those systems, and so the warning flags went up with the administration. Now, why it took the administration 16 months to notify me, I don't know. Don't care. In the future, I think they should notify me right away, as well as my office. So I think we both agree on that point.
But why were you not reviewing the charges of somebody who reported directly to you?
Mr. Barney,
isn't that just basic financial practice in any office that handles money and credit cards?
Office, but apparently the report said that somebody wasn't reviewing.
We all reported to
Mr. Barney,
the chief of staff, and the chief of staff always report.
Now you're blaming the chief of staff. Right?
I'm not blaming him for anything. I'm saying he. No, it's not about blame. I'm explaining to you how it works.
This is a profile and not courage. So, Mr. Barney,
I'm explaining how it works. This is not. I'm not putting any blame. You're putting words into my mouth, and let me speak for a moment.
Please do, Mr. Barney.
You asked how it worked in the governor's office, and charges were regularly reviewed by governor's office staff.
So the governor
And
signed off on all the charges?
I reported to the chief of
Did
staff.
the governor
any
sign
charges
off
that
on
I've
all
made.
the charges?
You're very clever in the way you change
should
things.
sign off on everything. So I'm saying, did the governor? It's a very simple question. Did the governor sign off on every single charge
to ask
for
the
the
governor.
administration? And are you willing to tell the people of the state that there wasn't a single personal charge, despite all the administration, there wasn't a single personal charge? Because that's what you're alleging on me, right? So I'm asking your
I'm
own
saying people
office,
that
did the
I'm saying
governor
your
sign
deputy
off?
who directly
did the
report.
governor sign off on every single charge?
You'd have to ask the governor.
Well, then, Mr. Barney, I think
All
you
right.
get the point.
All right, gentlemen, maybe we try another round, and maybe I suspect this one might be a little less heated. Well, let's go into the kinds of investments that the Cash Management Board handles. Two types of banks, different rules, and with one of the investment vehicles, I understand there's virtually no risk at all, but of course, then you're not going to have a high rate of return. So I just wonder if you would address the types of investments that are available to the Cash Management Board. And really what seemed to come down all the time when Treasurer Flowers talked about trying to make more money here, that is always the danger some might fear. Well, like with any investment, if there's greater risk, there's greater potential return, but also greater potential loss. And Mr. Barney has the beginning of this round. Uninterrupted 2 minutes.
Sure, and unfortunately, oftentimes this is pitted as an either-or of return versus security. And it's somewhere in between, but with some prioritization, which is subject to security of the principal. You need to do the best and have an obligation to do the best by the taxpayer that you can as far as return. But that priority is important because people need to understand what this is. When you talk about a portfolio, people tend to think that this is some kind of hedge fund investing. This is some kind of state-sponsored, high-risk, high-reward sort of investing that's going on. When you talk about a household, the analogy here is not to your IRA. It's not even to your savings account. It's really to your checking account. This is your operational funds. This is the funds that the state needs in the short to intermediate term to come back and be there solidly because it's the money they need to meet payroll. It's the money that the state needs to meet its obligations to its creditors so that we don't default, so we don't put our AAA credit rating at risk, which would inhibit our ability to borrow and invest in our roads and our schools. So the priority on the security of the principal is appropriate and is consistent with cash management in the private sector. You talk to private sector cash managers, they would tell you the same thing. But this shouldn't be put in some sort of polar situation where just because you want to keep a certain baseline of security, you're not always looking for opportunities to do better. And you absolutely should do better. And that's the obligation of the board to consistently review the guidelines and the investments that the managers are making and making sure that there's sufficient running room for the managers within the parameters of security for the taxpayers to make the best return possible for the taxpayers.
Thank you, Mr. Barney. Treasurer Flowers, same question.
Let me just explain this to the people so they can understand. It's nothing to do with the AAA bond or anything of that nature, or pensions or obligations. This is very simple. That as many of you, the state has cash flow needs that it needs on a daily basis. But it's not static. In other words, the state gets millions of dollars in every day. And generally, the money coming in from the state to the state is the money that we use to pay our bills. Kind of the old expression, first in, first out. That way, that money has not been invested. Every now and then for special payments, such as bond or things that or interest payments, things of that nature that require larger payments, we have to dip into our investment accounts. And it's structured in two ways. One is liquidity accounts. That's liquid money that we have accessible. And most states have only a set amount of liquid money available. Maybe 20, 25% of their portfolio is what's called liquid. To make sure that, if for some reason we have a large payment, we don't have enough money coming in, that we can tap into this money quickly without having to sell securities or, at a loss or a significant loss and pay the bills. We have about 50% of our money in that account, the liquidity account, and another 50% in kind of long-term securities. And what this debate was primarily about is that no one, when I walked in, could explain to me why this portfolio was set up 50-50. It was not financially backed up with cash flow models. It was like they came to a meeting one day and they said, 50-50 is the right number. That's not the way you do numbers. What is the statistical probability that the way you should allocate a portfolio is 50-50? as many of you know who are probably sitting at home thinking, it's probably close to zero. So no, you base your cash flow needs off a model. Money that you need should be liquid and put there, and longer money should be put way longer. It doesn't mean it's going to be put in riskier investments, but it gives your managers more flexibility to invest long term. So that's what that debate was all about, that I believe that you should have a cash flow model. God forbid it's a treasury. We want to make sure that we have a cash flow model, and we make sure that we make investment decisions about that cash flow model. I can tell you that the board wasn't making any decisions off a cash flow model because the board never even asked us for a cash flow model to make sure. They were just coming into a room and saying, 50-50. Treasurer Flowers, you're wrong because we said 50-50. That's not the way you manage money. And I'm sorry, Delaware, as I tell people all the time, we can do better. And that's just an area that we can do a lot better. And we made $44 million, but I guarantee you, had we followed some more additional advice that we had been given by our independent investment advisor, we would have made more.
Now, we'll start the cross-ex round, but let me lead it off with a follow-up question. One presumes the Delaware politicians of whatever stripe, certainly members of your political party, all have a vested interest in making more money for Delaware so they can avoid some of the agonizing choices that they've had to confront. So, they're going to want the spigot. They're going to want more money if possible. So how come, if the cash management board has been too straitjacketed and too conservative, in the sense that I intend the word conservative, how come most of the politicians seem to have sided with the cash management board over Treasurer Flowers? Either one of you may jump in this.
Well, first of all, I will say Mr. Flowers says this had nothing to do with our AAA credit rating. I deeply disagree because this goes to the foundations of the system. And we go back with the history. The Farmers Bank bankruptcy in the 1970s, where you had politically minded investments that went belly up, where we required a federal bailout on crippling terms, that devastated our credit. And it was in part through the creation of the Cash Management Policy Board that we got back on track painfully and over time. And we've had one of the best records in the country in terms of getting that AAA credit rating and sustaining it consistently over time. And that's nothing to bat an eyelash at. And in fact, it's what's deeply at stake in these debates, because Treasurer Flowers has suggested that he has constitutional authority to have this money all to himself in terms of the authority. He suggested that the board model should be dispensed with. And the reality is, when you look at states, and there are a very small minority of states that give this money to one elected official, states like Mississippi, states like Louisiana, their track record is abysmal. 2/3 of states that have boards like ours have, like us, a AAA credit rating. It is less than 5% with the states that give this to one elected official. That's important, because this is about our financial stability first and foremost, and that is money, because that is our borrowing authority. That is our ability to borrow at reasonable rates to fund road improvements, to support our schools. And when we play around with that, we play around with losing the taxpayers millions and millions of dollars.
Thank you, Mr. Barney. Mr. Barney, let me attempt to try to educate some of the voters on the facts of what happened. You keep bringing up the Farmers Bank incident. The Farmers Bank incident and why the state had some financial challenges was based on the spending practices of the state, and also we put all of our money in one bank without having a custodial relationship. That is not the model that we have today, and that's what resulted in our issues related to our AAA bond rating. Certainly, while the state treasury has a role in paying interest payments, but really the General Assembly should be committed about the AAA bond rating, because they have guaranteed that they only could spend 98% of the money that they're expected to take in, with a 2% buffer, making sure that we have enough money. So really, let's not scare the voters about, saying Treasurer Flowers now wants to play the AAA rating. That's lie, that's false. And so if you get any mailings to that regard, throw them in the where. With respect to the Treasurer Flowers wants some money all to himself, that's just factually inaccurate. What I've always said is, who's checking the checker? As Mr. Liddell pointed out, we had a member of the board who had an SEC violation. Many of the board members some of the board members have had stock positions in banks, and they've asked the treasurer to put money in those banks, and I think that's wrong. That's just downright wrong, and so I don't regret doing that. And then finally, my opponent said something about most states, have these type of boards. That is factually inaccurate. I'm the national co-chair of the Democratic State Treasurers. Most states, in fact, almost all of them, do not have these type of boards. I think there's some creative math going on when they try to count pension boards or other similar boards. But no, if you look at the pure powers of the Cash Management Board compared to the powers of the Treasurer, no, we stand alone. And my colleagues are very happy to say, no, Delaware is the only one doing that nonsense. Most states have found these boards unconstitutional. unconstitutional, violate, the prerogative of the treasurer to making sure that he can act in the best interest of the people of the state of Delaware. So let's talk the facts, not fiction. And so let's make sure that we address these issues as they come up by my opponent in a negative light.
Well, usually it takes at least between a couple of events or a couple of debates before Mr. Flowers' story changes. But actually, he did it within one answer there because he came back. He couldn't help himself but come back at the end to the constitutional argument that he was putting forward. He claimed constitutional prerogative to control the fund, and he challenged it. And that's why we had anybody who's been paying attention. I mean, all of the drama that was the underpinning of these debates and referenced earlier was months and months of all of this. You're sort of sweeping under the rug. The Attorney General had an issue an opinion to clarify the law. The General Assembly had to pass a law again on a bipartisan basis, not a dissenting vote, to clarify the law. Why were they spending their time doing that? Why did the Attorney General have to step in if you're saying, oh, the board is fine?
I love how you try to bring Bo Biden, but Bo Biden is not here to speak for himself, so I would hope that
he didn't issue an Attorney General opinion on the Cash Management Policy Board?
Mr. Barney, you had your chance. Let me address this
I know, I
issue.
just don't want you to get going and the facts get forgotten.
No, the fact, trust me.
Because it tends to happen.
I'm the only person here talking the facts. You're throwing the fire bombs, and I'm just enjoying putting them out with the fire extinguisher. But be that as it may, let's talk about the constitutional perspective. Mr. Barney, the Treasurer is the fiduciary to taxpayers, and the Treasurer has to make sure that any actions that we do act in the best interest of the people of the state. If the board, an unelected board, is telling the treasurer to do something, let's say put money in one bank that may not meet the credit quality of the state, or do something that the treasurer believes would put the taxpayer money at risk, the treasurer has an obligation to question it. And that's what we were doing, Mr. Barney. So, what you want to pretend is a negative thing is actually a positive thing. We have a duty, a constitutional obligation to make sure that we question things. It's not because the governor points 8 people to a board and says, treasurer, do this, that we're going to do it. No, we have to make sure that we make sense. There's some sort of mathematical logic behind it, and it's in the best interest of the people of the state.
So we suddenly didn't have a whole constitutional crisis where the legal authority of the Cash Management Policy Board ever happened?
I don't remember the state of Delaware.
It just never happened.
I don't remember the state of Delaware having a constitutional crisis. That may be you and the News Journal having that constitutional crisis. I think the people of the state...
So the legislature who does have the constitutional authority...
I think the people of the state had a great debate.
We were trying to do a little bit of 20 seconds, so give me a chance here. You had a chance to speak. The General Assembly is the branch of government that has the constitutional authority of the purse, has the constitutional authority over the spending. They have the authority to say how money will be spent and how, if it's not immediately spent, how it will be invested. That's why they are the ones who are responsible for creating the Cash Management Policy Board. And it was a constitutional issue when it had to go back to them to say, no, we're really, really serious, as we have been for more than 30 years. And as everybody understood, except you, who are a lawyer, of all people, should be able to read.
A few more seconds in this round.
Well, once again, Mr. Barney, you're going to show your ignorance of law. If it was a constitutional crisis, you would have had to amend the Constitution. The General Assembly did not amend the Constitution, so thereby there wouldn't have been a constitutional crisis. The General Assembly, Mr. Barney, I know you went to Yale, I went to Georgetown, but as you know, if in order to have resolve a constitutional crisis, you would need to amend the Constitution. So the General Assembly passed a bill. They did not amend the Constitution.
It was a constitutional crisis in that you were defying the authority that had the authority over it, which is the General Assembly.
They want to put you as a treasurer.
All right, how about
do what they want to do? But no, the rest of us here fought and we stuck up for what was right, and the people of Delaware have another $44 million to show for it. So
okay, I have my fire extinguisher now to win this round and go on. I said it would start non-contentious and then it build, of course. At the risk of covering some ground that we've already covered, this next question directed first to Treasurer Flowers. Your political marketing touts saving $44 million. Single-handedly, or is that the Cash Management Board?
Sure. Let me understand. As John F. Kennedy once said, victory has 1,000 fathers, defeat is an orphan. I guarantee if I had lost money, we would be there. Treasurer Flowers lost money. The board had nothing to do with it. But now that we made money, all of a sudden people are having trouble with math. Let me explain to the voters of the people of Delaware. We made $44 million, and this is how we did it. There was a period of time when we questioned the allocation that we just discussed with the 50-50, when the members of the board came in the meeting and said, we just wanted 50-50. We said, no, that doesn't make sense. We need a cash flow model modeling. And as a result, we had a legal question about whether or not the treasurer could change that allocation for example, 60% long-term, 40% short-term. Really and truly, there was nothing ever a crisis mode. But the board said the treasurer's position was it should be based on the cash flow model. Obviously, the General Assembly disagreed, and that's going to have to work itself out. But nevertheless, that's what it was. And so as a result of those positions and getting an independent advisor, diversifying, increasing the number of managers, all the things that the board opposed, that we basically were able to get more returns for the state of Delaware. Now, all of a sudden, I keep hearing, oh, it's preposterous. It's preposterous because it's facts. It's fact of the matter is that, the board went to the news journal with all these, it said Treasurer Flowers lost money. But when the numbers came out, we had made $44 million, and we're very proud of that decision. So I think my opponent, instead of arguing with it, just say, gee, Treasurer, you guys made a good decision. We made some good allocation. And yes, we may have disagreed on, the authorities of the treasurer as far as the allocation is concerned. But the people of Delaware made millions, and so we should be proud of that, not arguing and trying to figure out a way to undercut it.
Okay, thank you, Treasurer Flowers. Mr. Barney.
Well, let's start with the fact that the money earned on the cash portfolio and returned to the operating fund over the last 4 years is the lowest in 35 years. Basically the lowest since the Farmers Bank bankruptcy. So there's not any victory for there to be many fathers of, as the treasurer claims. I'm not sure why he'd want to claim credit. But it's a matter of public integrity. It's a matter of transparency. And you will notice that he very cleverly ducked Alan's question. When he was asked, did he earn this single-handedly or did the board do it, he said we, which is very clever because we could refer to the Treasury, we could refer to the board. It'd be interesting to know a straightforward yes or no answer. Was it you, Treasurer Flowers? Was it the board? And the fact is you've suggested differently at different times. Last debate you said, well, when I was on my own until the bill was passed, I earned all this money. Then you went previously before the General Assembly and they asked if you had ever invested the portfolio on your own, contrary to board policy, not at the direction of the board. And after a lot of questioning and trying to avoid the question the way you did here, you finally said never. So I asked you in the FOIA request that it wasn't originally a FOIA request. It was simply a follow-up on our discussion at our last debate where you said, I will provide you the monthly returns with specification of which months we were investing on our own, not at the direction of the board. We followed up with your office, and they said, we're not giving it to you, FOIA us. So we FOIA'd it. And then finally, at the 11th hour before this debate, because you knew I'd come back and say you didn't give it to us, then we got it delivered, but without specification of exactly this question.
All right.
Well, thank you.
When did you do it on your own?
Mr. Barney, let's see. Voters who are listening, you see why we need change. And I hope that you're proud of me standing up for change. We're actually sitting here arguing over who made the $44 million for the state. I'm just going to call one word: pathetic. Pathetic. That this state should be about rewarding things that work.
You're making a claim.
Mr. Barney,
it's the central premise of your campaign.
Mr. Barney, excuse me.
The central premise of your campaign is that you stood up to the board,
I'm not sitting here talking about Fisker and the $20 million
and made this money.
Lost. I'm sitting here saying,
I'm asking you not to insult people's intelligence.
We need to be here and talk about $44 million.
And give it to them straight.
Excuse me. We are getting to them straight.
Because during my
term, we made $44 million. But let me go back to the investment managers, the Treasury team, and the board added a contribution. They fought us out every step of the way.
They added a contribution?
They had a contribution. I don't remember members of the board
you
walking
were at
over
loggerheads
trades. I'm sorry,
Mr. Barney. You were at loggerheads with them.
Walked over and executed
you were at loggerheads with them.
You don't.
And on the opposite side of all the policy decisions.
Your high-priced consultants have probably told you
they set the policy.
The $44 million that Treasurer Flowers made. Get over it.
It's not a matter of high-priced consultants. It's a matter of basic respect for the voters of Delaware.
Get over it.
If you are going to,
we're going to continue making millions, and we're going to continue investing things right. Get over it. You don't have.
I'm not going to get over demanding simple, basic, straightforward facts from you because
we have policies and procedures, as you know, Mr. Barney.
Money.
We don't just give out documents. We try
how
that
can
with
we
travel.
Trust you to? How can we trust you to be treasurer? To have control over money,
Mr. Barney. Mr. Barney,
when you can't control it in your own office, and when you can't be straightforward,
Mr. Barney, relax.
When you can't be, I'm very relaxed.
Let's give the voters a dialogue.
I'm just insistent.
I'm speaking
I'm just
right now.
persistent because we've been.
All right, gentlemen. How about if we try? I've turned both your mics off for a second. Let's try some 20 to 25 second back and forth, so people can hear each of you distinctly.
Well, the issue here is a simple one of public transparency and accountability. It's a matter of an elected official making a claim to those he represents, those he's asking to vote for him, And it is the central premise of your campaign. And we've been through 4 debates at this point, and I am frustrated because you will not be clear on this.
Okay, let's go to Mr. Flowers.
Well, let me see if I can be clear for the a millionth time on this. Our administration treasury made $44 million. We put through reforms that sometimes the board agreed with, sometimes they didn't agree with prior to the statute being adopted. So it's semantics. I think it's pathetic we're having this argument. The bottom line to the taxpayers is that $44 million was made. It's now north of $50 million has been made as of today, north of $50 million. And we provided you with those documents after you fill out the appropriate forms and paperwork, because as we saw before, that all documents have to be processed correctly. And as you said before, we're making those changes. So, Mr. Barney, I don't feel bad for making you fill out some paperwork. You were given the document you requested within the statutory.
All right.
Well, I have to respond to that. Again, very, very clever before the statute was passed. Well, that's why we had the whole discussion about the Attorney General's opinion. That's why we had the discussion about your testimony before the General Assembly, because what you just suggested, whether you said it or not, which is the key with you, is you just suggested that you were on your own until January of this year.
I didn't suggest
when you said to the General
it.
Assembly, well, you just said before what we were doing, our reforms, that the board disagreed with. That was the key phrase, that the board disagreed with. That you were doing it not at the direction of the board, but the board was in disagreement with what you were doing, which is against the law.
Well, Mr. Barney, I'm going to disagree with you. There was nothing we did that was against the law. The law was in dispute. So there was nothing. I assure you, we had our Attorney General said.
Well, again, that's why it was a unanimous bill
Mr. Barney,
that passed clarifying, because there was only one person who didn't get it, which was you.
Your campaign slogan is now revolved around show the people of Delaware why the $44 million that Treasurer Flowers was made was bad. That's pathetic. So
all right. If we may move on, just kind of a quickie round, maybe a minute from each of you on these questions. Not including present company, I believe Treasurer Flowers is the next answer. Not including present company, could you name any past Delaware State Treasurer who has been the best one we've had and has been kind of a model in any way?
I don't like to pick and choose names, and I'm not trying to dodge a question, because each treasurer had his strength. I think Treasurer Markell with financial education. I think even Treasurer Rudnicki, again, challenged the situation. Treasurer Potter, I think, did some good things as well with financial education. And, Treasurer Carper, way back when, I think, at a different time, also had some good reforms. So I think every treasurer contributed. Now, hopefully, my legacy will be that we stood up for change and we brought Delaware's financial practices into the 21st century.
Okay, Mr. Barney.
We're going to have a rare point of agreement here. I think we need to be our own person in this office. We can look at the examples of those who've gone before us and some of the strengths of what they've done and learn various things from each of them. But we need to come and bring our own contribution. And my contribution is a focus on the rising inequality that we're seeing, the hollowing out of our middle class. I want to bring a focus on opportunity. I want to work with our foundation community and our financial community to create a system of opportunity accounts for every child in Delaware, seeded account designated for college or for training after high school. The research is powerful about these accounts, that they make it 4 times more likely that a kid goes to college, even when they come from a low-income or unbanked household. And so that's a focus I want to bring.
Well, I'm quickening the pace here just to try to get in a few other things. Next response, Mr. Barney. Actually, Treasurer Flowers, as I recall 4 years ago, talked about implementing a state financial early warning system. Well, has it happened? And isn't DFAC still the main early warning system? Mr.
DFAC
Barney?
is still the main early warning system. And again, it's a system that goes back and was actually one that was created around the same time as the Cash Management Policy Board, is a fundamental structure here in Delaware. I think providing some additional information, and to the extent that it's something that Mr. Flowers is able to do out of his own office and doesn't require cooperation from others, to the extent he's able to do that and provide a little bit of extra information, it's certainly fine for him.
Treasurer Flowers.
Yeah, DFAC is different, and I want voters to understand. DFAC basically predicts state revenues. It has nothing to do with the overall health of the economy. They're just looking at state revenues so the General Assembly knows what to appropriate and set a baseline for the General Assembly to appropriate. What we do at the Treasury through our Office of Economic Policy that we created and was something I promised 4 years ago with the Delaware Economic Index and the early warning system is we try to take all the economic data, looking for the Federal Reserve, White House, Treasury, and try to put all that information together and do a predictive modeling of how a reactive model of how the state did over over the last 60 days. That way, if people want to make major decisions, there is a one-stop resource that they could rely on to determine the health of the economy.
Literally just a few seconds. Each man, I take it, would support the other as the Democratic nominee. Mr. Flowers, Mr. Barney?
Yes, we have our differences, but we are still Democrats, and so, I think that I would love to serve another term in office if I'm not the ultimate nominee. I don't believe in endorsements, as I think voters knows. I don't get involved in that, but I think ultimately, I would support the Democratic candidate
Barney?
for treasurer.
I'm a strong and proud Democrat, and I will support the Democratic nominee and the Democratic ticket.
Okay, very good, gentlemen. You've heard a political debate for the Democratic nomination for state treasurer, incumbent Chip Flowers and challenger Sean Barney. This will be available as a podcast at WDEL.com.